All right, it's 1 o'clock. Let's jump into this lesson. This one's only an hour, so probably move a little bit quicker than this morning. But um, yeah, it's our first testing lesson, so yeah, it's important. And I want to start off with just kind of pulling the class, like based on what you know from Mod 1. Why is testing important? Go ahead, Kate.
I'm not sure if this is why it is important for real, but it's important to me because at least TDD, the process of writing the tests helps me get my head in order. So it kind of gives me a nice way to, outside of whiteboarding, kind of get into the this is what I need to do frame of mind.
Yeah, I love that example. It's like it's a way for you to really define the problem, right? Like right off the bat, like, all right, if I can write the test for the problem, then I probably know enough about the problem to get started. And it gives you like a framework for approaching solving the problem in a process that's like very step-by-step oriented, right? Cool. Yeah, I love that one. Hope, what do you want to add?
Tests break up everything into manageable chunks that help remind you to commit, and otherwise are just good milestones.
Yeah, I like that. Manageable chunks, 100%, right? Like it's a part of breaking down the problem into its like smallest solvable step. And then, yeah, it's a great commit kind of tracker, right? We get a test to pass. Cool, that's a commit. That's a great use case for it. Um, and what was the third thing you said, Hope? It was good. That's why I came back to it.
I think it was milestones. Is that milestones or something
Yeah,
like that?
thank you, Grant, for helping us out. Yeah, it's a great way for like you to track progress of your app. Like, okay, my app can do this now. Okay, it can do this now. Okay, yeah, now it can do this, and I know that for sure because I have an automated test, right? So I love that one. Taylor, what do you think?
It can help you with debugging, and if you're making changes and something breaks, it's easy to track down what went wrong if one of your tests fails.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it as like this kind of like safety harness for making changes, right? Like I feel safe making changes in any part of my application that has tests and that is well tested because I know that any like maybe unintended consequences that I miss, my tests are going to catch for me. Yeah, so I like that example a lot. Brett, go ahead.
I would just like add on to what you said, to where it's good to test your features in development instead of having them fail like in production, because then it could be like catastrophic. But in development, test it so you can avoid a lot of errors.
Yeah, okay. I kind of want you to elaborate on that a little bit. So when you say like if you don't catch it until production, it can cause like a ton of issues. What do you mean there?
Like say you have 300-400 visitors a day going to your website or something, and the create account button doesn't work or link, and it just goes to a 404 or something, then you could possibly lose, like, let's say some 200 possible potential clients from your website. Then if it did work, then they'd actually go and create an account, right? And so you're able to avoid that and make sure that those users are able to create an account and become customers.
Yeah, I love that. I love this kind of like relating it to the real world into like kind of like your bottom line as a business or as an app. It's like if your users can't perform one of these major workflows on your app, like creating an account, then that will result in, who knows how much lost revenue for that day, right? And so tests give us a chance to catch these things before we ever deploy it out to production, right? Before we ever say like, okay, this code is ready for the real world, we can test it in our test environment and make sure that like things are working the way we expect them to. Yeah, John, go ahead.
Kind of piggybacking off of what Brett said, I've noticed, well, I'm going to use Mod 1 as an example because I was there. But sometimes I'll get a failure or error and it won't be exactly, I'll have to go back into it, and it's not just that specific thing that's failing. It's a failure that's coming from elsewhere that's causing the thing that's popping up in my error or failure message. And if I had to deal with 20 of those all at once, I feel like, yeah, I couldn't do it. I'd just get lost.
Totally. Yeah. So it's a way for you to like really, I think like this goes back to that debugging point, right? Like it's a great way for you to catch these mistakes that you may have missed the first time around. And it's a great way for you to really dive into unexpected behavior in a way that's broken down to another, again, like these small chunks that are manageable. All right, Garrett, let's hear from you.
So to elaborate on the debugging point, like when I started Mod 1, I kind of looked at errors as like, dang, like I got an error, now I gotta fix it. I would say by the time I was doing the final project, I had gotten to the point where like not only was I embracing errors, but like I was kind of hoping for errors because like, especially when using testing, like it takes everything everyone said, like it breaks down your project in chunks, and then it's like you know where to go to fix it. So it's almost like the errors help build the the tool. Like they make it easier almost to build the tool because like you can kind of do what you think you need to do, and then like you just follow errors the rest of the way until it's working. And so I think it can be really helpful, and then testing breaks that down into like, okay, here's like the specific chunk that I can do this with. So I guess I'm just elaborating a little bit on, for me, like why, like kind of the path that like my thought process as far as errors went through to where I got to the point where it was like I wanted errors almost.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to make. I think that as developers, we should always look at errors as clues, right? Clues for us to solving to help us solve the problem. And I would say like even like one of the big things between that separates like junior developers and senior developers is a senior developer will look at an error very carefully and look at it as, you know, a helpful piece of information, and a junior developer will get discouraged by errors. And so like if you are on the path to expecting errors and looking at them on in a way that's like, hey, this is helpful for me, this is a clue, all I need to do is slow down and read this error, and then I can gather some information to help me solve this problem. Like that is the path to being a more advanced developer. Cool. All right, I loved all of this. Thank you all. Let's think about this in the context of the song list app that we were just working on. So when I need to see all the songs, right? If my goal is to see all the songs, what action do I need to take to see the songs at this point in my app? And like, right, if we pick up from the last class, what action do I need to take?
Index.
Say it again.
Index.
Index. Okay, yeah. So I need to like go to the index action, and I need to be also more intentional with my verbiage. So as a user, what exact I'm trying to think of a synonym of action. What exact step do I need to take to visit a page that will display the songs?
Click on all songs.
Okay, so I would click on maybe a link called all songs if I had one. If I don't have a link called all songs, what else could I do? Yeah, Jesse, go ahead.
You need to pass in the right URI or path.
Yeah, exactly. I need to visit the right URI or path, and I do that by typing that into my browser. Cool. All right. So if we think about that process and we think about it in terms of like a user story, then the idea is that we want to break down our problems into, you know, understandable English, and that is how we are going to like break down problems in the software world. In the professional world, it's like, hey, what do I need my user to be able to do on this app? And it is also a great framework for writing our tests. It's like we take a user story and we turn it into a test with our tools. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to do that and break it down for you, and like write a test and run the test. And so you're going to watch me do for a little bit, and then you are going to go do in breakout rooms, write your own test, and kind of get in the mud a little bit, and see if we can get a feature test to run. But there are some steps we have to take before any of our testing will work. So I'm going to dive into the setup portion of our test suite. So right now, we don't really have any tests written in our app, right? We've kind of like gone about this in a different way. We haven't been TDDing, right? We've been, I would say we've been BDDing, which is we've been doing browser-driven development. We've been using the browser and making requests to the browser and looking at the errors that we get in the browser to then go implement. And so TDD is going to be similar, but the big difference is that we're not going to go like test this stuff out by clicking in our browser or by sending requests in our browser. We're going to use the testing framework and the testing language to do all of that for us. So that the big difference is that we have something tangible that we can use over and over and over again. Whereas if we do browser-driven development, like, yeah, great, like that, you know, feature worked at that time for you on your machine, but like, is that the case forever? And we would never know that if we didn't have an automated test. So, all right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some things to my gem file. So I will go through these, but these are the tools that we need for testing. And so I'm going to add this stuff to my development test block here, and I'll add it right under the pry. And so we're adding a couple of things. So we're adding the gem Rspec Rails, which is our testing framework that we're going to use. It's going to be Rspec, and it's going to allow us to have a test suite. We're also including a gem called Capybara, and this gives us some specific tools for feature testing. So this is like specific language that makes our feature tests pretty short to write, I would say, like really like not a lot of syntax that we have to write. And it allows us to like break down user stories in a way that's like very readable. Very like our tests read almost exactly like our user stories, which is nice. Then we've got Launchy. Launchy gives us a chance to, at any point in our test suite, to do a save and open page. It's like a special method that actually opens your default browser and shows you what the page looks like at that time in your test. So it's kind of like a snapshot in time of like where you are in the test suite and what that looks like if you were like actually on that page looking at the browser. So that's a helpful gem as well. Simple Cov, y'all should be pretty familiar with. It's going to track coverage, and then yeah, that's all. Cool. Any questions about those? Yeah, I don't even know if you'll have like a ton because we haven't gotten into them, but it's okay if you do. Kira, what's up?
Will it throw an error if pry gem is on there twice?
It might. That is just an oversight by me. So thank you. George, what's up?
Yeah, would this be like the standard setup? Like, okay, we're gonna run test suite. I'm gonna do these 4 things in my group development every time. This is just like every time. Okay.
Yeah, and like, so what I'll say is like, you don't need all of these tools to write tests in Rails. However, these are the tools that we are going to use at Turing. And so yes, at Turing, 100%, like this is gonna be like part of the process. Like, all right, I need all these gems. All right, and so after I add gems to my gem file, I want to do a bundle install, and I want to make sure I'm in the right place, which is set list. Cool. Bundle install. Cool. Looks like we got some new gems going. That's good to see. And then from here, there's a special command that I use to basically generate some files and some directories kind of like on the fly for me that Rspec depends on. And so this is kind of like another one of those, like, I think eventually this will just be like memorized by you, but like at this point, it's kind of like just, you got to know that the command exists. And it's basically, excuse me, it's a way for us to like make sure that our files, that the files that we need for Rspec to run properly are in the proper locations. All right. And so what it is it's Rails G Rspec install. All right. And so this is going to generate some of those files for me. Cool. And you can see these creates. It created a .rspec, created a spec folder, and then within that spec folder, it created a couple of files, spec helper and Rails helper. One of the other things I've got to do, if I go to my, I believe, Rails helper, cool. This is like what was just like generated for me in my spec folder. It lives over here. I don't want you to worry too much about like all of this like config stuff for now. You can change some of this stuff to like make your test suite behave a slightly different, but the big thing that I want y'all to do here is just, we just need to add SimpleCov and make sure that SimpleCov starts up when this file runs. So I will do that by saying like, okay, let's require SimpleCov, and let's start SimpleCov. All right. And I think that order matters here. I'm going to put it after spec helper, and if things behave poorly, then I'll know that it matters like quite a bit. But yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Cool. So we've got that set up, and I still don't know if any of this stuff is working, right? Because I don't have a test to try it. So at this point, I'm kind of like, all right, like I think I'm doing things the right way, but I'll definitely know if I am once I write a test. And so if we think about like our tests and our user stories, and one thing to note is I just like updated the lesson. So just reload the lesson page if you had it up from before, because there's like one part that might be slightly different. So if we think about like how user stories go, it's kind of like this pattern. It's like as a user, when I do some action, maybe then I do some other action. So I visit the home page, I click on the link new task, then I see a form to create a task. All right, so I expect when I click on new task for there to be a form to create a task. All right, and so similarly, then I could even go on from there, right? I can do more actions. I fill in the title, I fill in the description, I click submit, then my task is saved, and maybe I expect like my path to be some path that I think like now I should be on this page. All right, and so that's a example user story from Task Manager, but generally like this is how a user story is going to flow. It's going to be like, hey, I'm a user, I'm doing some things, and then I expect a result. Then I use my expectations to assert that some things are true, or maybe assert that some things are false, or I should say refute that some things are false. Okay, cool. I'm gonna keep moving. I'm gonna get this back off the screen and get back into the suite. Cool. Yeah, so I'm gonna do my first test, and there's gonna be some specific places that I start writing these tests. All right, so I'm gonna get over here in my tree view. All right, and so I'm over here and I'm in the spec. And the first thing that I wanna do is I'm gonna create a features directory. Now, this isn't like the like guaranteed like way everyone does things on the workplace, but Rspec will, based on the naming of the directory, will treat certain test files in this directory slightly different. So it might treat the feature. So if I name features, then if I name the directory features, then all of the corresponding test files that live in this directory will behave slightly different than, say, the tests that I write that are under a models directory. All right, so Rspec looks at these things and and like make some decisions based on that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create this directory, and then I will create another subdirectory called songs, because I'm going to test the songs right now. All right, so I want to be specific in like what I'm testing. Yeah, Austin, I see your hand up. What's up?
Yeah, I just want to add a quick note so that nobody runs into the same thing I did. Last mod, do not forget your S when you name it features, or you will spend time figuring out why you cannot visit a page.
Yes, this is very, yeah, another one of those things where Rails is kind of like picky and specific, and it expects this directory to be called features, like Rspec does, so that like it behaves a specific way and gives you access to specific methods. So great, thank you for pointing that out. And then what I'm going to do in songs now is I'm going to create a file called index.spec.rb. And the part of this that I want you to pay attention to is, if I bring up my rename, I want you to pay attention to this. Every single spec file, doesn't matter what you call it, it needs to end in _spec for Rspec to pick it up. All right, this is another thing, got to be this way. It has to end in _spec. All right, and then it's .rb, it's a Ruby file. All right, so this is how Rspec will recognize that this is a test that it should run. Cool. All right, and now I want to think back to my user story, and I'm kind of like grabbing stuff from the lesson plan here, but I'm going to copy and paste my user story in, and I'm basically going to like run from here. So this is basically like where I'm going to start from is my user story, and each of these tasks I'm going to turn into a part of my tests. All right, so I'm going to do this is going to be slightly different syntax from the lesson, but I want you all to know that like both ways can work, and it's kind of like a matter of preference how you write tests. So I'm going to start writing a describe block, and so this kind of like gives me, if I do a describe and then tab, it gives me my block here, and I'm going to say, all right, so I'm going to say as a user, or actually I'm just going to bring this down here, and then I'm going to highlight it and put it into my quotes. Similar, I don't know if you all saw this in mod 1. This is like my approach to testing. It's like, all right, I have this user story. Same thing in mod 1. It's like, all right, I have this README and I want to turn it into tests. This is like how I approach things. So I want to say as a user, and then now I want to do another describe. And this one looks like, okay, this one looks like I can also grab it from here, and I'll put it in. It's not going to work like that. So I'll just write it. When I visit the songs path, and then now I want to do an it block, because the big difference here is describes are kind of like my setup, I would say, like of like they're mostly for readability, and that you can have kind of like as many as you need to for this specific test. So go ahead, Brett.
Do you need the rspec dot describe on line 3?
You don't need it. It is like,
oh.
It is nice. It is a nice to have. It is not a need to have.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Cool. And then yeah, so then there's like a couple of ways that you can write tests. I'm going to start with describe. And so then my it block is basically where the actual testing code is going to run. All right, so we've got some describes, and then we've got this it block nested. And now within your it block has some different behavior than your describe blocks will. So I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to say the user sees each song title and play count. Great. All right, so now this is where I kind of have to turn this all of these nice things that I've written from my user story into action. All right, and so that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to say, what do I need first? Well, I need some songs. The test database is different from your development database. So the first thing I have to do is create some songs so that my test database has some data in it for this specific it block. All right, so similar to in Minitest, in your methods, your test methods, you had to set up local variables, or you had to use a setup method to make sure that every test has access to those. Same thing here. I'm going to use local variables here to start within this it block, but I need something to work with, right? Like I need some concrete, tangible song to actually exist. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to copy and paste these from the lesson plan, and then I'll write out the rest, but I want my songs to be created for me, and I want those to be like the same as they are in the lesson plan. Cool. So let's line these up. Okay, so I've got 2 songs in here. So in theory, if I have 2 songs in the database within this test, these are the 2 songs that I expect to display on the page, right? Like these are the songs that now I will expect to see, all right? So the first thing I need to do is visit the song path, right? So I'm going to say visit, and then I'm going to give this songs, all right? So this is really nice syntax. This is what you get from Capybara, right? This is super readable, and it's basically like, hey, you're gonna visit songs. And so visit by default is gonna be a get, and so it's gonna be like a get to songs. So that's super readable, and now I've taken care of when I visit the songs path. Great, and now it's time for some expectations. So I expect the page, and so more on page to come. I'm going to pry in there and look around a little bit, but page is like an object that's kind of like in the background that's being built in your feature tests from Capybara. So I expect my page, and so page is kind of like, obviously we haven't defined it, it's this invisible Capybara object, 2, and I give it a .2, and then have content, and we'll say, I want to do it break from the lesson plan just a little bit, and I'll say, what did I call this before? Song list. All right, so I want song list to be there, and now I'll do some Command C, Command V, because I know my .to have content is going to be the same. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of like string interpolate some things in here. So I expect to see a song.title, or this should be song1. I'm gonna name my variables correctly. And then I also expect to see, let's say, a song2.title. And I'm like breaking from the lesson plan just a little bit. But then I'll say like, okay, like I also expect there to be a play count hard-coded string here that then points to my songs, song1.playCount and song2.playCount. So now I've got a lot of expectations here. I've got about 5 that are related to my index page. And the amount of expectations is kind of up to you, of like, hey, what do I want to like ensure that I have here in terms of functionality? But I would say the more the better, right? The more things I can expect, the more robust my test is, the better things should go for me. Okay, cool. So I've written this. I've introduced you all to a lot of new syntax. So I get if like you're following along, you're writing along, if things aren't going perfectly to plan, that's okay. I just want you all to like focus in and probably like watch me for a little bit and watch how this thing runs. All right, so one thing that is like a pet peeve of mine is when I run the test suite, I want to make sure I'm running this specific test. So I see students all the time.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're missing a space in the string testing song2 play count.
Yep, I sure am. Thank you. Cool. Appreciate that look. All right, so one of the things I see students always do is like I'm pairing with them and they hit Rspec and they hit enter, and I'm like, you're really not narrowing down the window of errors that things are, or like the window of like specificity to be focused in on one specific thing. So I would say like when you're running a test, run the specific test. All right, run the specific file and run the specific test, all right? Because especially when we're including a model, a view, a controller, it's hitting a lot of these things as we go. We can't be sure of what test we are even in unless we are running that specific test, all right? So I wanna be very blunt about that. Jake, go ahead.
Is typing in just RSpec similar to like running rake?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, if I just run RSpec, it'll run all my tests, which isn't gonna like trip me up here because I only have one, but I'm gonna show you what you should be running. And so I wanna give myself the path to this specific spec, which is the index spec. So now I've narrowed it down to just this file that I'm gonna run. I'm just running the index spec. And then if I wanted to narrow it down to a line number, I could do that. If I wanted to give it the name of the it block, I could also do that. These are like command line arguments that I can pass in. I'm not gonna spend time on them now. Know that they are available and know that to skip a test in RSpec, we would do a X and then it. So I could also skip all the other tests so that I'm focused in on one test, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna run this and I already know that I forgot something. So I'm gonna get an error and I want you to see this error. Okay, let's look up here. Failure as a user, when I visit the songs path, the user sees, okay, so it got in here and it says like uninitialized constant song. Well, that's unfortunate because if I look back to my suite over here, then I can see there's a song, right? There it is. Like I've got that. Let's look at my schema. Yep, I'm not crazy. There's a songs table. I should have access to all this stuff. Here's something I forgot, and I'm like notorious for forgetting this, so I noticed that I did, but I wanted to run the test suite first. You have to require Rails helper at the top of your test. Otherwise, you're not getting, Rails helper is basically loading up your environment for you so that your test environment looks similar to your development environment. All right, so I have to require Rails helper at the top of the test. Otherwise, I get unexpected behavior. All right, now I'm gonna run this thing. A lot of warnings. Don't worry, there's a way to get those to go away. Oh, and look at that. Something that never happens. Green on the first try. So yeah, enjoy these times because they are few and far between. But we already did the functionality for this, right? Like we already like browser drove the index page. So all of this is working as we would expect. And I can show you if I look at index.h, it might be slightly different for you because you might not have your songs index page laid out exactly like this, right? But there's a couple of things I want to point out. It's like, hey, this worked because I set up my route, right? I could visit this. I had a controller action. That controller action had a corresponding view, and indeed, I'm passing the data of all the songs and I'm displaying it in a way that I told my test suite that I should be. All right, so this is like, you know, great. The instructor does it and everything goes brilliantly and I do it and everything crashes and burns and that's okay. But like, know that this is a lot of new syntax, a lot of new stuff. I wanted to like keep it simple and we have a test here that runs. Now, based on what you have here, I will ask you after our break to go into breakout rooms and try to do a show spec to show one specific song. But yeah, let's take some questions and then we'll take a break. Brett, go ahead.
I was just going to say, throw a save and open page in there to show it.
That's a great point. There's actually two things I want to do. I wanted to throw the save and open page here. Yep. Save and open page. This is that like special method that I was telling you about. And if I run this again, cool. So I get to see exactly what the web page looks like at this moment in time. At this moment in time on line 15, I put a save and open page there. Boom, we opened it and here we are. This is what it looks like at that time. And that's why all my expectations work here. Cool. I want to show you one more thing, and then I'm going to keep taking questions. So what do I like to do? I like to pry. So I want to hit this pry. I want to look at the page object. Cool, not that helpful. What if I ls page? Ah, look at that. If I ls page, I get to see basically all of these capybara methods that are available to me. All right, so this is a great way if you can't remember, oh, what's that one called? Does it have content, have link, have this, have that? Here is how you can see all of these things, all of these assertions, all of these, actions that you can take. You can do this ls. The page object is like one of these objects that's in the background that you can check out. Cool. That's what I wanted to show you. Now I'll do questions. All right, so who's next? We got 5. All right, Jake, go ahead.
So this is maybe less of an actual testing question, but your song objects, like song 1, does that automatically created just from the ID that way?
Yeah, so it's not actually creating it. It's kind of running like in your test database, and it's running the same way that it would in the console. So the only difference is like you're in a test environment and you have a test environment, you have a development environment. Those two things are separate. Those two databases are separate. So when I run this create, it runs it for the test database. And I'm not really doing anything based on the ID, but know that there are IDs happening here under the hood. And I could see, if I go back, I'm in my pry session, if I want to see what song 1 is, like, okay, it has an ID of 5 at this point, which you might not expect, but this is because I've run the test now multiple times, right? And so these songs have been created multiple times. And so now the ID is song. There's a number of songs in the test database, and we'll get into database cleaning at a later point.
Okay.
Yep. Will, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just following along and then did a commit and noticed it put all my coverage stuff in. Are we supposed to add coverage to .getIgnore?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Add coverage to get .getIgnore. Cool. Hannah, what's up?
Yeah, so I just had a question about you named your file index underscore I think it was spec or something like that. So is that corresponding to the index method? And this is like less corresponding to the user story, but we're like kind of testing each method, which somewhere should be like in the user stories.
Yeah, so it's kind of like both. So yes, the index spec corresponds to I'm testing the index action, and I'm writing out the user story in a way that's more like that's less developer-y and more like human readable, right? So it's in a way that like is like very clear, like, yeah, as the developer, I know that I'm going to the index spec or I'm going to the index action here, but really I'm just writing this like as a user story that I might get from product who doesn't need to know about how CRUD works, but maybe wants to look at a test and say like, okay, like, yeah, as this person, I do this, I see this, okay, I'm happy to see that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, did I skip you? I feel like I didn't, but I just want to make sure. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't. Cool. Zach, go ahead.
So this kind of like 2 parts of this. First part, kind of off of Jake's question. So these songs that we're creating is actually saving to a database. It's not quite like a stub kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not a stub, and like this we'll get into some like testing strategies where we don't actually like save things to the database, but like in this example, we are running a create action. We are saving things to the test database. There are some ways to like not do that.
Okay, and then for describe, is that basically just like kind of like comment notes for the person testing, or do they actually play a role in the testing itself?
Yeah, so you can't have an it block unless you have the describe block. So the describe is always going to be first. So you got to have the describe in there, but it's more for like readability of like reading what this specific block is supposed to be.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Kira, go ahead.
Because the test resets every time you run it, is what's happening behind the scenes. Like if we had Postico open, is those songs would be created on the table, and then as soon as the test was done, they'd be erased.
So interestingly enough, at this point,
And also, I just noticed we're short on time, so if you don't want to show that right now, that's okay.
no, that's all right. So I still have access to song here, right? Like similar to how I would in the console. If I do a song.all, yeah, so what you're saying is correct. And it's basically like, all right, like right when I run the test and then the test ends, those basically there's some cleanup happening under the hood that I don't see in this context. But like if I look here at my songs, I have 2 songs, but the IDs are indexing like forward based on all of the tests that I've run before. So that's like a kind of like a weird quirk nuance that you probably wouldn't expect.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break, come back at 45, and then y'all are gonna jump into some testing. Thanks, 45.
Hey, Tim, could I ask you a really quick question about how you're getting those shortcuts in your Atom, like to add the files?
Oh, for sure.
Go back
So
to my terminal.
yeah,
Could you just say that?
so I totally, I'll show you right now. So the way that I
Okay.
do it is I like do a command and then backslash, which toggles my tree view. All right, so I'm holding
Yeah,
down
okay.
command
Mhm.
and toggling that. And then what I'll do
Sure.
is I can see where I am, like over here in the tree, and I can move with my
Mhm.
arrows wherever I need to be. And then if I'm in the right directory, if I want to create a new directory, it's Shift A. If I want to create a new
Shift A.
file, it's just A.
Shift A is a file folder.
Shift A
Sorry,
is
say that one more
folder,
time.
and when
Folder.
when I do Shift A, you can see it's like, okay, enter the path for the new folder. And then if
Mhm.
I do just A, it's enter the path for the new file. And that's like quick way for me to do it.
And how
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you drag a
Cool,
whole
cool.
line
Thank
again?
you.
Wait, say it
Oh,
one more
that's
time.
so fun.
How do you drag a whole line again? Not drag, like just move
Oh
it.
yeah, yep, totally. So that is command control on the line and then up and down.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. Okay, cool. Another question, Joshua.
What was the command to run the test again?
Yeah, so it's rspec and then the path to the file. So if I exit, it's rspec and then path to file, starting from the root. Yep. Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I am a little like I understand what we're doing, I think, ish with the user stories and using that like in the describe and the it. I guess part of the question is like one, like are user stories always provided, or like am I gonna have to like basically like think up cool stories whenever I create a test?
Yeah, so eventually you're gonna have to think them up, right? But for the purposes of like mod 2, we're gonna provide most of the user stories for you.
Okay, and then I guess my second question to dovetail off that is like, how important to the actual functionality of the test is the content that I have in the strings?
Which strings?
Sorry, like how important is the actual content of the story I create versus just having it there? Like, do I need to create a good story or like?
Yeah, you gotta create a good story. You kidding me? Yes, this story needs to be readable to you and every other developer that ever comes to it, and they need to clearly understand exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, I'm gonna open these rooms. You should have a pair, one group of 3. And what else did I want to say? Okay, yeah, I dropped what I want y'all to do in the chat, but I'll drop it one more time if I have it, maybe. Oh, I've got this little extension that y'all might not have seen yet. It's called Copy Clip up here. And so it's basically like all of the things that I've copied like lately. You get it from the Mac App Store if you don't have it, but it's super useful. All right, so I put it in the chat. What I want y'all to work on. I want you to work on writing the test. I like getting the actual implementation is less important than trying to get a test that's set up that will run. All right, so I want you to like get a test set up that runs, and I expect you to get failures. Like we expect an error, but I hope that the suite runs. All right, so that's like the hopes. And yeah, we'll take like, I'm gonna cut into your 2 o'clock time just a little bit. We'll take like 12 minutes on this, and then we'll come back and I'll kind of like show you my example, and then we'll close out. So we'll go like maybe like 5-10 minutes over, but yeah. All right, I'm gonna open these. See you soon.
Ah, hate everything. Oh crap.
All right, looks like we've got everyone back. Cool, so I would love to see someone's show spec. Some brave soul that wants to share their screen and show us their show spec. Cool, looks like Connor's hand went up.
All right. So we didn't quite get to the very end, but yeah, this is what we got.
Cool. So yeah, walk me through it line by line.
All right. So our user story is, as a user, describe when I visit the song show page. I will then see title, length, and play count. So we have our song. We're going to visit the song ID, and then we're going to expect the page to have content of the song one title, expect length to have the song length, and then play count to have the play length. And then that's the end of that test. And then you have your second test. It has the link back to song's index page where visit goes to the same page, and then we expect to have a link, and then it's going to be called back to index.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love this. And 2 things I want to point out. Within each it block, we have to do 2 things here. So we have to have the visit has to happen twice. And interestingly enough, we don't have access to song 1 in that second it block. So we would have to like create that variable again in the second it block to have access to it. So those are like 2 kind of like things to point out there, that like the first test I love, and I think it's going to run. The second test, you would need to put in that song 1. Yep, exactly. So that you now have access to that local variable within the it block. Cool. Let's leave this on the screen, and then I'm going to answer some questions. Hope, what you got?
I'm sorry, mine was still up.
Okay. Cool. Kira.
Could Connor have also moved using that fancy command control to move lines 22 and 23 just underneath line 14?
Yeah. Yes. So he could, and I would say he would only need to move line 23 at that point, because we'd already be in the context of the first test, we'd already be on that song show page. So right. You could technically like basically get rid of that second it block and put your final expectation there on in between lines 14 and 15, and it would be like, my final expectation is I expect to have this link back to index.
And instead of the visit, there would just be that like link to syntax.
Well, so we wouldn't have a visit, because we are like the visit that ran on a line 11 would put us on that page. If we wanted to actually like click on that link, then we would use the click on syntax that Capybara gives us.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, so just on that topic, that was actually going to be my kind of the first part of my question was just like, do we have to kind of break it out into two? And then I guess the other part is, how do we make this determination as to whether or not we should have like more than one if block? Like, is there any sort of like best practices, or kind of just, I don't know?
Yeah, this is gonna like be you're gonna get better. This is one of those things you're gonna get better at it as you go. I would say like you can have like a lot of things in one it block. Once you get to a point, like I break it down, the way that it works for me is like I would probably break it down to like at most have like 3 sets of actions and then 3 sets of expectations. But like this is like just for the purposes of mod 2. Like there might be a user story, right, that is like so long and that you have to check so many different things within one test that like it actually makes sense to go through the entire workflow in one it block. But this is going to be like one of those things where I'll say like, if you can break it down to be a single chunk, I think it's more readable to be a single chunk, but just look at it and say like, how dry is this code? Like, is this code as dry as it could be? Or am I duplicating functionality here? And that's like something to like, that's going to be a case by case context basis. Cool. Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so we only had one song that we tested. Well, actually, my partner and I did it in like an each block to test song 1 and song 2. Is it okay if we just test like one, even if we have multiple things in the database? Like,
yeah, that's a great question. I think like in the context of like testing a show, I think one's okay. Some people might say go ahead and test 2. I think in this context, like I'm of the opinion that you tested the things, like if we look at lines 5 through 14 on the screen, like it looks to me like that everything is tested. However, like if I created 2 songs for my test, I would test both of them. Like if I would do the each thing that like you said, like, oh, like I'd put them in an each and then I'd test it for each. But like this is also another like context specific thing. It's like once you get into the on the job and into like a large app, like the test suite takes time to run, right? And like having testing strategies that are as fast as possible might be like what you need to take because the test suite is slow already and you need to like be as fast as possible and efficient. Or you might be at a startup that like doesn't really like it's like not as big of an app and they're like no we want the testing to be even more robust, so test it a few more times, like make sure like give it 3 or 4 example objects. This is another like matter of like a depends on the context.
cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, good question. Jake.
So as I was kind of sitting here stewing in my question, it kind of turned into a two-parter. So is the song 1 that's in there, is that actually in your database, or that's only in your testing database?
It's both. It's in your test database at the time that you're within the SIT block.
Okay, so with that in mind, so what I did was like on the visit, I actually did song / whatever the actual ID is rather than song1.id. Is that okay, or is the song1.id better?
Song1.id is much more preferred because you can't guarantee what the ID is of any song at any point in time. So you don't want to hard code that value. But yeah, great question there. All right, Taylor, what's up?
So what is the actual class that we're testing here? Or is this across all, like multiple classes, or do you test classes individually?
Yeah. So this is a good question. So we will have a class on model testing. So we will do model testing, which is just testing the song in isolation and all by itself. This is a feature test. So this touches on like mini classes, right? Like we're hitting our routes file, we're hitting our controller, we're hitting our data, we're hitting our song model, we're hitting our database. So we're hitting a ton of different things. And a feature test is generally going to be an integration test of a lot of like many things working together, but we will write model tests that are specific to like one thing in isolation, say the song.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, who's next? Looks like Connor.
Oh, was I next? Not Brett or Cheryl?
Maybe the thing messed up. I thought Cheryl was next for me, and then now the hands have moved above Cheryl. So let's go with Cheryl next.
I have a couple of questions. One is if you were to combine this into one, do you just make the it statement longer, or do you put like how would you do that?
Yeah, so if you were to combine it into one, we can show that right now. So let's cut line 23. Yup. All right, so we've got that cut. Let's delete the entire second it block.
I didn't actually cut that. I apologize.
That's
Now
all
it's
right.
cut.
That's all right,
right.
cool. Yep, so let's get rid of this entire second it block. So everything from 16 to 24, yep. And then in between 14 and 15, let's add a line. And let's paste, yep. So this is like how we would combine those, basically, because we're already on that song show, right? And we expect to have a link back to the index. Now where it gets a little fuzzy is like, all right, I expect to have all these things on the screen. Now, if I want to add to this by taking some actions, like clicking on that back to index and then writing another expectation, like, hey, now I expect to be on, I expect my path to be /songs, because now I'm back to the index, and I expect like my like, do I then keep writing and say like, oh, now I need to like reassert like that all of my songs are showing up? It's like, nah, probably not. I probably just need to check that I'm on the right path, because I already have an index spec that says like, when I visit this path, I see these things. So this is like where it would get like, it's going to be kind of like up to you as you go, and you'll get better at it as you go, and we'll give you feedback like throughout the mod of like, hey, this test is a little redundant, or like, hey, like this test is a little long and needs to be broken up.
Okay. And I guess part of that was like what goes after the it in quotes. Would you just like copy and paste that and add that to the original it, and it would just be longer? Like I also see a link back to the songs index page. You still want to include that part, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so you could. This is like a choice, right? Like, so if you make the second int block, then like you have to do some more work, right? Like visit the page again and create the song again. So if you want to avoid that work, you put it back in the other one, and maybe just like you add to yeah, you could add the quote, what's in those quotes, like to like your first it block of like, I see this, this, and this, and then you could add like and a link back to the index.
And then two other probably quicker questions. Do you have to make a new file for every test? Like you have the index spec, show spec, and then every time you make a new test, there'll be a new file?
Yeah, it would be like a new file for probably like every action or every like new feature. So like every like new set of steps. But if you need to add like, what if you like add to the show page, like, you know, what if I add a column for the song called, you know, I don't know, some other column, and then like I add that to the show page, I'm not going to create an entire new file for that. I'm going to add that to the show spec.
Okay. Yeah. And then last one, sorry.
It's okay.
Because when I was thinking about expecting the page to have the link, I was thinking of the actual link, but is that going to what you were saying, that's already being tested and this just needs to have the, like, I'm not sure what this putting back to index in quotes, is that actually testing if there's a link with those words, or what is that testing?
Yeah, that's testing like that there's a link that has those words, exactly.
Okay.
We haven't, but we're not clicking on the link. Clicking on the link is like a separate action. We're just testing that that link is there. Yep. Cool. All right, let's go to Brett now.
I was just wondering, are you going to go over within blocks at another lesson?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yep. Okay, Connor.
Okay, so with the have link, that was kind of just based off a guess of what it could be, possibly be. Is that like acceptable enough for testing the link, or I mean, what is the other functionality that, I mean, are we just supposed to go look it up on that part, or?
Yeah, I would say go look it up, or like do
Got it.
like do like the LS page, and like you'll find it in there.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. And there's a bunch of stuff. It's like have button, have link, you know, have this, have CSS, and like there's a ton of like helpers there for you. So it's going to be.
Is there a way to check syntax with the LS? Is there an LS? Well, I mean, can you put the function in there such as have link and then help to see what the syntax should be?
Yeah, so you can get a gem
Or
called
Google.
No, well, you can get this gem called PryDoc. I don't think I've showed it, but let me share real quick, and then I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So I have this gem installed. I think it's called PryDoc or something like that, but oops. I did want that Rspec. Come on. All right. Okay. Did I have a pry in there? I hope so. I think I do. Yeah, I do. Okay. So I have so what I can do here, let's make this full screen. I can do this LS page, right? And then I can look at this and be like, all right, there's all these things like, what's the documentation for page.goback? And I can say show, I think it's doc page.go back. And look at that. That's pretty nice. It gives me the documentation for, nope, show doc is deprecated. I don't know if this is a great one. Okay, show source. Cool. So it gives me this line. There's another one that is gives you a better things. So show doc and show source. Or maybe it could be that there's just not that great of documentation for this one, but I could have sworn that there's better. Yeah, so if you gem install PryDoc, you can get this, it'll kind of add it to Pry. If I go to the wiki here, this is not what I thought. Okay, well, I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this, but there's basically you can look at these methods, and the two things are show source and show doc, and they kind of show different things. So maybe this is just a bad example, but we could try has CSS and see if that's a better thing. Yeah, so some of them don't have a definition, but if I wanted to do let's say I want to become a song. So have a song, right? Yep. Okay, so let's cd song. So now I'm a song. I see myself. Okay, so if I say self.find and I do a show source self.find, this is better documentation, right? Like now I can see what is there for the find, and this is active record documentation. I swear there's a even better one. Yeah, it's not show doc. I'll figure it out later and tell you if I can figure out which. There's a different method that I think shows an example that's a little bit better. But anyways, this stuff is available. All right, well, I'm gonna stop sharing and get back to questions. I'm gonna say also it's 2:22. I've taken more time than I expected. So if you want to hop off, feel free, but I'm gonna answer questions until we don't have any more. All right, I think we'll go with Greg next.
So I was looking at the so chances are in like an actual page, I would never ever put the link just by itself. I would like wrap the link in like a nav bar or some other element. So when you're doing the test for that, would you? Because I originally put my like a element inside of an H3 header 3, and then the testing for the have link didn't work. What would be the way? Would I be testing for the content inside the header, or what? Is there another way to like format it to test for a link inside of another element?
Yeah, so this is kind of like what Brett was alluding to. There's like this within syntax that you can use to really like scope down to like, hey, within like this block of elements, just look here and grab these elements. And so I didn't show you all that, but know that it does exist.
Okay, that's something for future time. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. Good question there. All right, Zach, go ahead.
As far as turning in, like, say, like on independent challenges or projects where we actually have like a test suite that we're turning in, should we remove the save and open page?
Yes.
Is that just more for us while we're doing the tests and debugging? Okay.
Exactly. That's for your own like development and your own like kind of like checking out the page at specific points in the test.
Cool.
Yep. Cool. Yep. Good question there. All right, Will, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to remember how you showed to tell what methods were available. Like for example, the have link thing, and I thought it was the ls page, but then that's using like has instead of have, and I can't see those ones that have.
Yeah. Try an ls self.
Oh, ls self. Okay.
Yeah. And that probably will put like a bigger list of like methods that you have available.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Connor, did you have another question?
No.
Okay. All right, Will, go ahead.
Oh, I'm done. Sorry.
Oh, my bad. Yep, Joshua, go ahead.
I'm having a weird error that's coming up when I try to run the test. I'm wondering if you can maybe at the end of this help me troubleshoot that.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, let's do John's question, and then we can do that like right here.
Well, thanks.
Yep.
Might want to do that because I'm kind of in the same boat.
Okay, cool. So let's do this. Let's end class then for this session, and I will we'll reach out to like you, Josh, and you, John, like individually.
Okay.
Any chance you guys might do it here in chat? I would prefer to see the errors in case I hit them.
I'm not like opposed necessarily, but like it's just gonna take longer because like basically like we would probably Brian will probably do one and I'll do the other, but.
Oh, Josh, just out of curiosity, what's your error message? Just to see if we have the same one.
Yeah, it says database set list test is being accessed by other users.
Whoa, that is not what I have.
Interesting.
Josh, you might have your server running.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Depending
what I
on
would
what you're
guess.
trying to do. Yeah.
That would be like my first guess too, but like why don't you go ahead and share? All right. Cool. There is one other session using this database. Okay. So let's do this. And that's when you run Rspec, right? Yeah.
Doesn't it tell you how to fix it right there, Tim? It says run bin rails db migrate rails envelope test.
I haven't seen that. Okay, yeah. Rails end test. Okay, so you're getting like, it looks like 2 errors.
Yeah, it's because he has Postgres open also. Postgres,
Yeah, I was looking at Postgres too, and I'm like, that kind of makes sense that like Postgres would be like you loaded this up. So let's see if we can narrow it down to 1 error. So let's close Postico.
Sure.
Cool. And yeah, so now we're not connected. So let's run it again. See where this gets us. Cool.
Okay.
And then this is a failure. Let's just make sure it's a failure that we want.
Oh, okay.
Since you were index and not show, did you want to do index?
Yeah, so this is a null violation there, where it's basically like, I think this is like screwed up because of the way that that you probably migrated your created at and updated at, which like I didn't intend to like screw you all up, so my bad on that. But like it was just like I wanted to show you how to add those a different way. But what you can do is you can roll back that migration and then just like take it out. Like you don't need these like created ats and updated ats for anything. Like I was just they're just timestamps. So what we could do is we could roll back the migration one step so that we go to where we just have songs in the schema without any of the created at updated at columns, and then like go forward from there.
Okay. I could probably just look that up then. If John, you wanted to ask your question.
Yeah, that would be great as long as Tim's okay with it.
I'm good with it.
All right. So I'm just getting a routing error. Just saying no route matches, and I don't know why, because my routes are, I only have one thing to route to.
Yeah, no, this is a good question. So this is like, let's go back to your routes file and let's put it up right next to the test file. All right, so you have a get route that goes to the songs index page, but you actually don't have a get route that visits a specific song via the ID. So like that's what you're trying to do on 14. On 14, like when you say it, like visit this like specific song by song ID, it looks at your routes file and it's like, yeah, we don't have that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. I can fix that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank y'all. Great questions. Great engagement. Sorry I ran late, but we have PD work time next, and then I'm trying to think. I'm gonna look at the calendar and see what's after that. I think y'all have project work time after that. Yeah. Okay. So, but here's what I'll say. I ran into your PD work time, so now what I will ask you to do is run your PD work time into your project work time until you are finished with PD. All right, please do that. Okay, cool. I'm gonna end it there. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.